There is so much going on a national level, but I am always going to take time to cover important stories from Oregon. And honestly, this story is applicable to everybody in the United States. This just happens to have occurred in Oregon, but it could just as easily be happening in your state or your county as well. So listen up. And again, I always try to warn folks when I'm going to get escalated, this story's going to make me really mad. It came out in The Guardian. It's called Revealed: Oregon Spent Funds Meant for Addiction Services on Prosecutors and Police Gadgets. This is by Sam Levin. It was published in The Guardian on Monday, May 19th. Some of you may know that my second child works in homeless advocacy. And so I'm keenly aware of how important that it is that we fund addiction services, that we fund beds in rehab. What a key component that is in ending the homeless crisis, helping people transition from homelessness to stable housing, to becoming employed, to living stable lives, to maintaining their recovery. That starts with providing addiction services for them. Any "we're going to fix the homeless crisis" solution that does not include funding addiction services, beds in rehab, it's not going to work. And we in Oregon should understand that better than anybody. And so I'm livid at what the district attorneys and the sheriffs are doing here. Grants that are supposed to be funding treatment are being sent to DAs and to the cops. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go read the whole article. It's too long for me to cover all of it here. So I'll link to it in the video description. It's really important that you go read the whole thing. If you care about Oregon, if you care about corruption, if you care about the homeless crisis, please go read this whole article. The state of Oregon last year announced that we were going to spend $20 million in grants to help connect people with substance use services. Funds, the governor and lawmakers said, would go to counties to support a treatment-first approach, encouraging jurisdictions to get drug users into recovery programs instead of arresting and jailing them. Some local governments, however, have spent the taxpayer-funded grants to beef up law enforcement. Budget documents obtained by The Guardian through public records requests reveal that several counties have put the money toward hiring prosecutors, acquiring police gadgets and police vehicles, and covering sheriff's costs. Washington County, the state's second largest jurisdiction, budgeted twice as much of its funds for police and DA salaries as it did on community programs. Other counties used the money for laser devices meant to detect drugs that have been criticized as completely useless. Cool. Not only are they not taking my taxpayer money and spending it on the things that it is supposed to be spent on, but they're wasting it on a bunch of scammy, useless schlock. Some recovery organizations and advocates for people with addictions say the spending was a misuse of funds meant to help people in need and an example of governments prioritizing policing over investing in services to address an urgent public health crisis. Oregonians, our state ranks last in the nation for treatment access, while overdoses here have surged to as many as 5 deaths every single day. So our state has gone through this embarrassing flip-flop on decriminalization, and that's a whole other story. I've talked about it in the past. But in response to that, $20 million was set aside for grants that were called deflection grants, which would allow police to refer people facing possession charges to services, to get help, to get clean, rather than dumping them into our already overburdened legal system. Washington County got $1.5 million of that money last year. $700,000 of that money was spent on new law enforcement positions. They hired cops and people in the DA's office. I don't know how much y'all are taking home, but apparently Washington County shells out $257,000 a year for a sheriff's lieutenant position. By the way, they also dished out $40,000 in overtime pay to existing sheriff's employees. They only spent about $360,000 of that $1.5 million on a program focused on peer-to-peer mentoring and getting people into rehab. According to Grant Hartley, a public defender in Multnomah County, when you spend money on a district attorney position, that might make 2 or 3 case managers you can't hire, or a contract of services that you can't make. Data from Washington County shows that few people have been successfully directed into treatment. What the fuck do you think you're doing with our $1.5 million of tax money, Washington County, that was specifically supposed to go for that purpose? Oh, I see. You've filed more than 1,000 drug possession misdemeanor cases in Washington County, the highest number in the state. So instead of focusing on getting folks into treatment, you are charging more people with possession. The exact opposite of what that money was supposed to go for. So while Washington County District Attorney Kevin Barton charged over 1,000 people with misdemeanor drug possession, he only allowed 75 people to be referred for treatment instead of being charged. That's because Kevin Barton set up really strict eligibility requirements, disqualifying anybody who had any other charges against them or were on probation or any other kind of supervision. But, since people who are targeted by the cops for possession arrests are often unhoused with criminal records, the program is effectively inaccessible for most of them. So many of them are already on probation or have other pending charges because they are targeted by police, because they were put into the criminal justice system in the first place when all along from the very beginning, they should have been put in rehab. So Kevin Barton, District Attorney for Washington County, is effectively cutting off treatment from the people who need it most. District Attorney thinks we can still arrest our way out of the problem, says Fernando Pena. Substance use disorder is a public health issue we need services to deflect people to. It's not just Washington County. Clackamas County also spent $260,000 hiring a new senior district attorney, money that was supposed to be spent on drug rehab services. Yamhill County hired a new DA whose job was pursuing criminal charges against people who were not given deflection and doing the opposite of what that money was supposed to be spent for. They hired some guy who wants to put more homeless people in prison rather than getting them clean and stable. Union County and Crook County did the same things, spending a huge chunk of their grant money hiring sheriffs and district attorneys. In a truly embarrassing move, Clatsop County spent $71,000 of taxpayer money for two TruNarc spectrometers, handheld devices that are marketed for detecting narcotics. They claim that it allows law enforcement to scan directly through plastic bags and glass containers to, quote, reduce exposure. I've got a whole lot of old videos, by the way, about how you cannot overdose on fentanyl just by touching it, despite the fact that cops lie about that all the time. And there's a lot of videos of cops absolutely faking their swoon and their overdose. It's just psychosomatic. So if you live in Clatsop County, you might want to check out who it is that wasted $71,000 of your money on these two scammy devices that don't work. Public Defender Hartley said TruNarc was requested because of a myth about the dangers of fentanyl exposure, which I have debunked over and over again. And by paying for it, you're endorsing that myth. By the way, it's not just Clatsop County. Polk County spent $76,000 on TruNarc. Wow, it sounds like a whole lot of cops got scammed out of our taxpayer money. They fell for that grift. They fell for that disinformation. They fell for right-wing conspiracy theories about fentanyl overdoses. Shock. Marion County spent $81,000 on one patrol vehicle. They claimed it would be used to support the addiction population, but also for the safety of our citizens beyond the deflection program. Let's be clear, the most cost-effective thing you can do to reduce homelessness, to reduce drug addiction, is to get people housed and in treatment. Increasing policing, increasing district attorneys, increasing more charges, putting them into the criminal justice system, that does nothing to solve the homeless crisis or the addiction crisis. All it does is perpetuate the myth that we need more cops. All it does is waste taxpayer money hiring cops that we don't need and paying for prison services that we don't need. Let's look at a county that actually is using our taxpayer money the way they're supposed to. Lane County, thank you. They spent almost $400,000 for low-barrier emergency housing focused on treatment. They spent $700,000 for a services provider to handle case management. Spent that money on a team of navigators to support people entering into deflection to get them housing, clothing, and food, assess their treatment needs, and get them medication. Also created recovery plans for them. Thank you, Chris Perosa, Lane County District Attorney. This is what you're supposed to be spending our money on. Criminalizing addiction not only doesn't help people get clean, it doesn't help end the homeless crisis. It wastes our taxpayer dollars. It just perpetuates this really false notion that if you just punish people harder, if you just throw them in prison, they'll stop using. Waste of taxpayer money. It's failing to meet the need. Thank you to The Guardian for covering this. I'm so mad at those counties who wasted these funds. I'm so mad at all of these counties who ignore all of the data, all of the researchers, all of the organizations who say, we know how to solve this problem. Please, please let us do it. And they squander the money on junk science gadgets, new cop cars, and hiring more cops to arrest more people and put them in prison. God damn it, Oregon.